You all right?
Everyone to please stand. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to officially call this meeting to order. So I do see that we have some of our commissioners that are here, Commissioner Price and Commissioner Johnny Wilson. I would like to also turn it over to the City of McDonough. I'm not sure if you have a quorum to call.
Madam Chair, I don't have a quorum present.
Okay, all right. And the City of Stockbridge, Mayor Ford.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I do not have a quorum present at all.
Okay. All right, and City of Locust Grove, okay.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, we do not have a quorum at this time.
Okay, all right. And do we have a representative from the City of Hampton?
Madam Chair, we do not have a representative of the city of Hampton,
Okay, all right, thank you.
but the meeting can proceed because all cities were notified.
Okay, all right. So I'd like to call the county manager forward, and so she can introduce the speakers and tell us how we're going to move forward with the meeting.
Good morning, Madam Chair, mayors from our respective cities, and staff members who are also representing the cities. As you all are aware, Chair Harrell called for this joint meeting as required as we are pursuing the referendum for FLOST. As the law requires us to do, we must have a joint meeting amongst our chair and mayors and/or mayor pro tems and staff members, and so that is what we're doing today. We do have with us virtually two representatives, one from ACCG and then one from GMA, who will do some very brief presentations on the FLOST program. We thought it was important to make sure that we had representation from both the county and the city level. Following those presentations, we will then have a presentation from Mr. Phil Sutton, who will be working with the county on making sure that we're checking all the boxes as it pertains to the referendum. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Dante Handel, who is with ACCG, and then the next presentation will be from our representative with the Georgia Municipal Association, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dante.
Good morning, Dante. How you doing?
Hey, good morning. I'm well, thanks. Hope y'all are.
If you can go ahead and get started, that would be great.
Yes, ma'am. So, thinking about the floss generally, the floss is the newest sales tax. It was created under House Bill 581, which passed in 2024. And the purpose of the floss, so the floating local option sales tax, because it's tied to a floating homestead exemption, is to provide property tax relief. And it says in the statute that it's to be used exclusively to provide property tax relief. Now, the statute provides one mechanism with which to do so, which is to reduce the county and the city's rollback rate. So that's the annual rollback rate that you calculate on that PT 32.1 form. And whatever the millage equivalent of what you receive in floss dollars is, that gets converted again to that millage equivalent, and your rollback rate is further reduced by whatever that amount is. Now, what that means practically for y'all is that it's not going to be a windfall for the county or the cities. So it's not providing additional revenues. It's not offsetting any loss that you have by having a floating homestead exemption or freeze, but it is an additional benefit to your taxpayers. The thinking behind it at the time was that a floating homestead exemption would shift some tax burden from homestead properties to non-homestead. The floss dollars, because they reduce the millage rate, would provide some relief to those non-homestead properties, as well as providing an additional benefit to the homestead properties because your homeowners are being helped on both their value and on their millage rate. Then, of course, in order to do a floss, you need a valid intergovernmental agreement between the county and the cities that levy a property tax and have a floating homestead exemption or a freeze. The minimum requirement being a city or cities that represent more than 50% of that municipal population in those qualified cities. And I'd be glad to answer any questions.
So, Dante, I do have a question. Because Henry County has a frozen homestead exemption, how does that impact us?
Because Henry County has that frozen homestead exemption, that means that Henry County meets the eligibility requirements on the county side. And as long as all your cities that levy a property tax have a float or a freeze, the county and those cities are eligible to move forward with the floss, and I believe y'all are.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any questions from anyone up here?
Well, just to make sure I get clarity, I suppose, we recently in the city of Starbridge passed a homestead exemption, additional homestead exemption. So I would imagine that, I was just out of curiosity, I should know the answer to this, but I'll just ask the question to make sure how this affects us also in this aspect as well as we go forward.
So that homestead exemption in Stockbridge, does Stockbridge have either a freeze or a float, or did they stay in the House Bill 581 homestead exemption? I apologize, but I don't know.
No, we opted in, but I mean, we have a special city homestead exemption. I was just kind of wondering, I should know the answer, so I'm asking the question, right, just to make sure. And my staff said, no, so okay, why did I do that? But I just want to know whether or not how that affects this overall in this aspect for 581.
Yes, sir. So because y'all stayed in on the House Bill 581 exemption, you meet the eligibility requirements for the floss. That other homestead exemption doesn't affect things positively or negatively, doesn't change anything for you. It's just in addition to that House Bill 581 exemption.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So let me ask an additional question then. With regards to, do you have to charge a tax to be part of floss?
So for the cities, because all the counties are levying a property tax, if you're a city, you have to have some sort of millage levy, either a general M&O levy or a special service district or a bond levy. If you don't have any of those, then were the floss to pass, it's still collected within your city limits because it's a countywide tax, but you're ineligible to share in the proceeds.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So stand by, Dante, don't go anywhere.
I was going to say that.
You got it.
Thank you, Dante. At this time, we also have Leona Rittenhouse and Ryan Bowersox, and I hope I pronounced those names correctly, with the Georgia Municipal Association. And I just wanted to, because we do have our cities here, give them an opportunity to present, and then wanted to make sure, Leona, to Mayor Ford's question, to make sure that that is still the understanding on the GMA side. So thank you for being here as well.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for having us. And good morning, everyone. My name is Leona Rittenhouse. I'm here along with my colleague, Ryan Bowersox. So we are here to give the GMA perspective when it comes to FLOST. So when it comes to FLOST, I'll just start off by saying that Dante did a very good job going over FLOST. The only thing I would probably add to that is that we see FLOST from the GMA opinion as being another tool in the toolbox for local governments to be able to use when they are looking at their taxes in general. So we do want this to be another tool in the toolbox. A bit of background, the legislature also wanted this to be another tool in the toolbox. We do see that this in the law is supposed to be used for property tax relief. We have been advising all of our cities to use this for property tax relief. We have heard of cities that have been going through and looking at a potential population split when it comes to dividing up the FLOST among the counties and cities. We are not advocating for any sort of split. It's whatever we feel and what our cities feel is best for them, and what every local government feels is best for them when it comes to determining that split. If I left anything out, I will turn it over to Ryan, and then we will be open for questions.
Thanks, Leona. Yeah, I'll just reiterate here. In its kind of basic nature, the FLOST gives the local governments, the county and the cities within, the ability to, if they so choose, to reduce their reliance upon property tax and shift that over to sales tax. So of the various sales tax out there, the newest one created is an additional option to do that if so choosing to access that. To address Mayor Ford, your question on from saying in the 581 exemption, you are definitely eligible for the FLOST, which allows the county and the cities to move forward. I don't know the exact nature of the additional homestead that you passed. The way the homesteads interact with each other is that if it is another freeze or float, the property owner receives the more beneficial of those two. If it is a flat dollar amount homestead exemption that you have created in addition to the 581, it's going to be provided in addition to that of the benefit. So flat dollar amount, you layer them, another freeze or a float, those are compared, and the taxpayer receives the more beneficial of the two. But just baseline, by staying within the 581 exemption, you are FLOST eligible.
All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So I have a question, and I guess GMA or ACCG could chime in on this. So because I want to go back to the frozen homestead exemption, because I want to make sure that our residents and our constituents understand the process. So I have the tax commissioner and tax assessor here. So because we have the frozen homestead exemption, which basically it freezes your taxes at the purchase price of your home. But we know today market values of homes have gone up over the last 2 to 3 years. Do they have the option to choose whether to stay with the frozen homestead exemption or to go with FLOST? And in receiving that tax relief, is there a way for the tax assessor's office or tax commissioner's office, whoever does this, to give them an option of which would be a better choice for them? And if you would come up to the mic, and I do have my tax commissioner here and I have my tax assessor here, but what I'm trying to see is that if my taxes are, if my homestead exemption is frozen, but then you're saying that the floss is supposed to be a tax relief, then I'm trying to determine, do I stay with the frozen homestead exemption or do I go with the floss? Because which one is going to give me the better bang for my buck when it comes to actually having some type of tax relief?
Yeah, great question, and we're in the midst of working through those calculations right now. The way the legislation reads is whatever is a better offering for the resident. So those are the calculations that are being done. Our software company vendor, John, Mr. Self's software vendor, those are the calculations that we've been dealing with over the course of the last 2 weeks as it stands right now. But the way it's supposed to work is whichever gives a greater benefit to the resident. There are some scenarios where the floss very well may be a better option. The vast majority of them, again, because with Henry County having it frozen, I've owned my property for 10 years, and we've seen nothing but an increase over the 10-year period in the valuation of the properties. The strong likelihood is that property is going to have a better benefit on our current local exemption. However, there may be some, again, those that are in Couva perhaps, or perhaps some that are fairly new to the county. Again, it's just going to be a matter of running through the calculations.
I think, so the taxpayer is listening, framed it in your question, they don't have to do anything other than apply and receive a homestead. It's our job by law to determine which benefits them the most. Now, the floss is an offset, and I'm not an expert on the sales tax side, but it's not an addition to, I think, and I don't want to get too deep into that. Maybe Dante or Michael, one of you two want to do that.
Well,
but
the floss is a great benefit because, again, it's an opportunity to, once again, lower millage rates for residents within Henry County. So in much in the same manner as our SPLOS, those that are coming from outside of Henry County who are shopping and spending their money here in Henry County will see the benefit of that tax relief on, for our county residents and the millage that they're faced with. So again, big benefit to the county in the same manner that SPLOS is a benefit for our citizens as we stand today.
yeah, I think that's across the entire county.
Right.
The homestead is specific to the individual. Yep.
Not sure if that addresses your
Okay.
question or not.
Yes. Any additional comments from GMA or ACCG with regards to that?
If I may, Madam Chair. So we have a couple different concepts at play here. Henry County has the frozen homestead, which is applying to those homestead properties on the value side of the equation, where there's a comparison. It only comes into play if you have a frozen homestead and y'all also stayed in on House Bill 581. Didn't y'all opt out of House Bill 581 because you already had the frozen, or am I mistaken?
No, we stayed in.
Okay, then I believe in all instances, your frozen homestead exemption is going to be more beneficial to the taxpayer unless you had some sort of special service district millage or bond levy where it didn't apply. That's the only instance where that would happen. Now, as far as the floss goes, we're no longer looking at the value side of the equation. Now we're looking at the millage rate. And so for every taxpayer, the floss is used to lower the millage rate across the board. So it's not an either or. Every taxpayer will receive the benefit of the floss whether they own a homestead property or not.
Okay. And
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Madam
Go.
Chair,
I'm sorry, Ryan.
Completely agree with Dante there. In most instances, the freeze will be the more beneficial to the individual homeowner because it doesn't allow for that inflationary index increase. So that should most of the time be the more beneficial of the two regarding the valuation on the property. Either the 581 or the freeze will make you eligible for the floss. And then those additional sales tax dollars will help across the board, homestead and non-homestead, for property tax relief.
Yeah. And to John's point, residents will not have to do anything. They won't have to go back and do a comparison. That's what we're working through on those calculations right now. So when they receive their bill, they will have received whatever is better. And again, I agree with Dante. What we're seeing is the vast majority is going to be those here in Henry County, because we've had the frozen provision in place for so long for county taxes. That likely will be the predominant relief that they'll see. However, there may be a few instances where the floss is a more beneficial option, and in those cases, that's what they'll see, that's what will be reflected on their tax bill.
Okay, and so I want to also clarify that we're talking about the county side of taxes. And so the school board has their own millage rate and taxes.
That is correct.
School taxes.
And they-
which are exempt, my understanding, from the floss. Am I right or wrong?
Well, they opted out.
They opted out.
Correct.
Most school districts across the state opted out.
That is correct.
So that doesn't impact the school taxes, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, so there is no, because the Board of Education opted to not adopt the statewide floating exemption, the millage that they have is the millage that they'll have once they go through, and I think they're scheduled to adopt their millage in the next couple of weeks. So there will not be there is no ad valorem exemption offered on taxes, and the frozen provision that we currently have locally does not apply to the Board of Education, the school taxes.
I'd like to clarify one thing too, to people watching or listening. Frozen component is part of Henry County, as you mentioned. It's also part of Hampton, City of Hampton. Those are the two frozen exemptions that are available. So everyone doesn't have that choice. Some are just 581, which is really good. And then I think we have Locust Grove that is essentially 100%, which that wins every time, I think. Yeah, so.
Yes, sir. So with the 100%, this really doesn't necessarily impact us directly because we already have the 100% exemption, right?
Could you say that again?
With us having that 100% homestead exemption for Locust Grove, it doesn't, ours supersedes what this is, right?
Yes, that's going to take precedent over any other.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if I may, to Mayor Pro Tem's question, because there has been questions regarding, because Locust Grove is 100%, are they still eligible for the floss? And we have confirmed that they are eligible to receive the floss, because we were trying to determine, with it being 100% and you all not collecting, but because you all still collect on the commercial side, then you are eligible.
Yes, ma'am.
And they didn't opt out.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Any questions from the dais up here?
Well, I have a question, but I guess generally I want to bring it up to GMA, but I mean, imagine this might spark conversation across the board. In 2020, Starbridge is roughly 29,000 citizens. Now in 2025, we're right around 36,000. So how does this all affect us in the process here with dealing with this floss, with the population growth currently?
My understanding is, based off of what's been presented, is that that's going to be a number that's negotiated.
Okay.
There's no, it's not tied to any specific populations.
Negotiated between the Starbridge and the county, or Starbridge and the rest of the cities? How's that? You say negotiate between who?
That's probably a little bit out of my purview, I think.
I'm happy to chime in here.
Okay.
Yes, unlike a number of the other sales taxes, the criteria in which to negotiate the floss is absent. There's really more flexibility provided upon the county and the cities within on how they want to negotiate the distribution of the floss proceeds, with the restriction being it should be used for property tax relief. We don't have, similar to loss, a criteria or a population consideration or anything along those lines. That is left to be negotiated between the parties that are required to be on the intergovernmental agreement to put that forward as a ballot question to voters. So that will be the county and cities representing 50% of the municipal population of the county will need to come to an agreement on the distribution, keeping in mind the absent municipality provisions that are out there as well. But as long as those required parties can come together on an IGA, at that point it can proceed to the voters for approval.
And if we don't?
If you don't, you just don't proceed with the FLOST. Unlike when you're renegotiating loss, there is not some deadline where a tax goes away. The FLOST just will not be levied at that point until an IGA can be agreed upon.
Thank you.
And Mayor Ford, if I may add, I think the county's approach to this is going to be very similar to our SPLOST negotiations, and where county staff is going to work with your staff to work through that piece based off population and further detail.
I appreciate that because we are one Henry.
We are, and we offer the most of services that cost money.
Okay. I have no more questions actually right now.
Any questions from any of the
I
cities?
just have one question, and that's for the people who are, the individuals who are listening. So FLOST is much like SPLOST. So every 5 years, we will be voting on FLOST once this referendum is passed, or how often will we vote on FLOST?
I think that's also to be determined. I think you can be anywhere from 1 to 5 years, as I understand, but that's negotiated as well, or voted on. Sorry.
So it's a moving target, and so as of the current legislation, it is every 5 years. The only thing that we have to, and it would have to go back to the voters, similar to a renewal of our SPLOST and T-SPLOST penny. The only thing that we will have to finalize is what that distribution amount is. And to Mayor Ford and Chair Harrell's point, that's where the staff is going to have to really work through it. I was glad to hear GMA, I believe, mention that they are not advising us to look at population, because that is what we typically would look at with our LOST, with our SPLOST, and so every jurisdiction is doing it very differently. The next speaker that you will hear is Mr. Phil Sutton, who's been working with counties on FLOST, because this is new to all of us, and the legislation was something that we are continuously having to peel back and see, you know, how does it impact the county and how does it impact the cities? At the end of the day, the one thing that is very clear is that we have to provide tax relief to the residents. So that's the one thing that we will all agree on. I think how that amount is dispersed is where myself, your managers, and your staff will have to work with our elected officials and then bring back to each of our respective bodies a recommended number. And then as the mayor and the council and the chair and our board, we will have to decide what works best for the county as a whole.
Thank you.
Ms. Sherry, if we're not going to look at population, what do they recommend we look at?
So I've heard a couple of recommendations, and one of the numbers was based on your total tax digest, the percentage of your digest. That being one of the recommendations. I don't know, Dante and Ryan and Leona, if you all have been working with any other jurisdictions. I know our consultant has some information that he can most certainly present, but I didn't want to come here and have a host of information without giving the cities an opportunity to make some recommendations. So ACCG, GMA, any recommendations that we can share with our mayors and mayor pro tems and the county chair?
So all the information that we have is out there on our website under FLOST resources. One of the items that we included in there was trying to provide an equivalent rollback for the county and all the cities on their various millage rates. So that's one way you could approach it, but at the end of the day, you all do have full flexibility to negotiate it however you see fit. Two items I would like to add on the discussion of FLOST versus SPLOST. So it can run for up to 5 years at a time. When you get to that renewal period, the renewal will require a local act from your local delegation of the General Assembly. And if they don't pass that local act, then it cannot be renewed. The other thing to keep in mind is, unlike SPLOST, FLOST does not have a set project list because it's not being used for individual capital projects. It's broadly used to provide tax relief through rolling back the millage. Just wanted to make that clarification.
And once again, agreeing with what Dante added here, we have kind of left that up to local decision making. There are some jurisdictions that have chosen to kind of pursue something similar to the digest or something similar to population. We are not advocating for or against any of those calculations, but whatever fits your local community, we have looked at within the law. There's broad flexibility for y'all to come to an agreement, and that's what we support.
And to add to what Ryan and Dante have said, everything that or almost everything that we have produced, we have done jointly. So what you will find on ACCG's website, you will find on GMA's website. We wanted to make sure that we were producing everything jointly and having a unified message when it comes to explaining the FLOST and explaining both bills. So anything you will find will be on both websites.
One more question I would have would be, if we do decide to do it based on population, will we do it based off of the 2020 census or like a more current ARC count of population?
So what the county's position has been is to always go off of the the latest census data. So it would be that 2020 census, or at least that would be my recommendation to our board.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I was wondering, it's got quiet here, so I would tell you that obviously the staff's got to work together, but I would surely hope that we go with the current population, period. Anyway, more to follow. Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, if there are no further questions from you or the mayors and mayor pro tems, I would now like to call up Mr. Phil Sutton, who is with Rochester DCCM, and he has been retained by the county to help us navigate through this SPLOST referendum, and just wanted to allow him an opportunity to highlight some of the things within the referendum, and more particularly the timeline that we're under to get this on the November ballot. So at this time, I'll ask Mr. Sutton to come forward.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
To all the elected officials up front and in the back, and all the staff. I'm Phil Sutton. I'm with Rochester DCCM. DCCM stands for Design, Consulting, and Construction Management. So we are a full-service engineering firm and one of the top 20 engineering firms in the Atlanta region. But I do a lot of my work. I'm a former county manager, city manager, been in county and city management for about 35 years or so, and been consulting for about 12 years. I've been doing a lot of work on sales tax consulting lately, T-SPLOST, SPLOST, and FLOST, and LOST. I helped negotiate your LOST back in 2012. I do want to go over some of the things that GMA and ACCG have talked about. I'd like to do a little bit of background work, because I find, even though this topic has been floating around for some time, a lot of folks have don't have a broad view, so I'm going to try to give you a little bit broader view. This reform package, it's called the Comprehensive Property Tax and Sales Tax Reform Package, and that's clearly what it is. It did more than just create FLOST for you. I know we're going to focus on FLOST now and in the coming weeks, but there's also a component of this. It's a four-part bill. The first part had to do with the tax assessors rules reform. There was a lot of cleanup that the legislature wanted to do, needed to do. They revised the tax estimate notice on the tax bills. They established a 3-year lock on appeals. There had always been a 3-year lock on appeals, but now you have to win the appeal in order to get that 3-year lock. It used to be that you could simply file an appeal. Once that was filed, your property tax values were locked. That's no longer the case. It also helped straighten out some sales tax ratio studies issues that counties were required to do the sales tax ratio studies. In one way, the state used a different set of rules, and that often created some conflict at the local and state level. The second part of the legislation had to do with authorizing the statewide floating base property tax value for homestead exempt properties. And they gave local governments the option to opt out if they so chose. I know that's a handful, but one thing that I find gets confused many, many times is that this homestead property tax limitation, the limitation for growth in the property tax, is on homestead exemption property only, whereas FLOST, the sales tax rollback, affects all property, whether it's homestead, non-homestead, apartments, commercial, industrial, it affects everybody. So we don't want to confuse the fact that we're doing a homestead exemption limitation. In Henry County's case, of course, the freeze is probably going to rule over the growth in the digest values that can and will go up with the rate of inflation. The legislation also extends the sales tax cap from 8 cents to 9 cents, and it creates FLOST. I won't get into, unless somebody wants to talk about it further, there's some specific changes to the property tax rules and procedures that are primarily under the guides of the tax commissioner and the tax assessors. The statewide homestead exemption, it establishes the floating homestead exemption that allows sales tax digest assessments on homestead exempt properties to rise at the annual rate of inflation, and that's based on the consumer price index. Now, how is that different than it has been in the past? In the past, before this exemption, the tax assessors and tax commissioner would be focused on trying to match their digest to fair market value. And in the Atlanta region, fair market value has been growing for residential properties at about 6 to 7% a year. And in 21 and 22, they grew at 17 and 21% during those 2 years. And so if a tax assessor was trying to keep that pace, of course, they were far outrunning the inflationary. Now, you didn't have that problem here because you had a tax freeze, property tax for homestead exempt property tax freeze. But that's one of the reasons that this legislation came about. The legislation was approved by the voters in November 2024 at about 65% statewide, and it applies during this taxable year. It went into effect January 1st, 2025. Property tax values reset if there's a sale or if there's a substantial change to the property. So once this homeowner that owns the property now sells the property, then the tax assessor is to reassess that value based on that sale. Or if there's a substantial addition to the property, that can also trigger a reassessment on homestead exempt properties. This exemption is in addition to other homestead exemptions. For example, the Stockbridge question is a very good one. You've already put in a separate homestead exemption. That still applies, and then the FLOST is on top of that.
Thank you.
The freeze or the float, as we've discussed with the tax commissioner, tax assessor, and ACCG and GMA, you're to use whichever is better. Whether the freeze is better for your resident or the float is better, tax assessors, tax commissioner will calculate that. Chances are 99% of the time the freeze is going to be a better option than allowing your the value to rise with inflation. But they'll determine whether or not that applies in each and every case. So the homestead exemption reduces or eliminates the property tax increase due to rising home values after purchase. That's the purpose of the homestead exemption, so that the value of the tax digest rises only with the rate of inflation. Henry County's case, you've got a frozen exemption that locks the assessment value in at the base year and prevents any increase in the taxable value. That stays fixed for the current property owner. Though the millage rates can rise based on the decisions of the elected officials in the city and the county. It does not freeze your millage rate, just freezes the tax digest value. So one of the things that this bill does is it adds the limit, it revises the limit for local sales tax from 8 cents, which is what it was, to 9 cents after January 2025. And it creates these buckets, if you will. They have the 6% that's been in place, 6% limit for local taxes that's been in place for many years. There's 4% for the state and 2 additional cents. It could be, the 2 additional cents are for lost or e-lost. There's about 8 counties in the state of Georgia that instead of using lost for city and county tax relief, it's used for school board tax relief. And so that's an e-loss. So you could have one or the other, but not both. Then there's 3 additional buckets. One's the education splost, which we refer to as e-splost. There's a transportation sales tax, and you would be eligible for a single county transportation splost as long as you don't have a regional T-splost, transit splost, or MARTA. If you have any one of those other 3s, then you would not be eligible for a single county T-splost. And then this bill provides for one additional tax, and that's FLOST. As long as you don't have OLOST, C-splost, or MOST. And those are very specific. I'd say there's about 3 OLOSTs in the state. Macon Bibb would be the most recent example. C-splost is the Coliseum splost, I believe that's for Augusta, and then MOST is for the city of Atlanta and the cities that are connected to the city of Atlanta's water system. So that MOST is only for that purpose. Okay. So the FLOST, it can be levied for up to 1% sales tax, and specifically for property tax relief. The law says over and over and over again that the only purpose for the revenue that you receive from FLOST is to provide property tax relief. The split between the cities and counties would be based on those cities and counties that levy a property tax. Freeze or float, the cities and all the counties that must have, in effect, a base year value adjusted or adjusted tax base. So they must have a freeze like Henry County, or they must have the float like all the cities have opted into. FLOST law requires an IGA that states that the FLOST is going to be used specifically and exclusively for property tax relief. The distribution of revenue between the city and county stated in the IGA is negotiable between the cities and the counties, but it is often based on property tax collections or property tax digest. In my experience, that's what most of the governments have focused on, although it's not exclusively spelled out that way. The state may be the tax may be levied for 5 years, and in order to renew it, you need to have your local legislative delegation and provide a local act to the General Assembly to be approved. So you're going to want to start, if you put the tax in place, About 4 years into it, you're going to want to go through the process to have your local legislative delegation levy a local act so you can take that to the voters. So there's some documents that need to be prepared and you need to authorize to sign. That would be an IGA, and a resolution that includes the percentage distribution between the cities and the county. And I would say that we need to do that as soon as possible because the time frame for getting this done is very short. There needs to be a resolution to approve the mayor and chairman to sign the IGA on behalf of the boards. And then the county will need to issue a resolution to notify the Board of Elections that it intends to call the election. And from a practical standpoint, most ballot builders will need that information by the end of August, at the very latest, the very first week of September. So this is work that needs to be done in the next 4 weeks. The ballot wording is included in the intergovernmental agreement. And this is sort of, on the left side, 1 through 5, I want to note that after the vote, if it's approved by the voters in November 2025, the floss would start on January 1st, 2026. You would collect all year long, and then the rollback would be calculated based on the calendar year collections for 2026. So you have to know how much you've actually collected, and all of those funds, including the interest on those funds, would be used to roll back property taxes the following tax year in 2027. So you're going to have a year's worth of sales tax collections before the rollback occurs. So you need to keep that in the back of your mind. Then it's renewed every 5 years. And the calendar on the right just notes the advertising date requirements of the fact that early voting begins the week of October 13th. It actually begins October 14th, which is the Tuesday. So you want to have your educational campaign well underway before early voting starts, obviously. The official vote date would be November 4th. It becomes effective January 1st, and then in December 31st, 2023, FLOST would terminate unless you've renewed it. And you, of course, have to involve the state legislature. This is sort of the critical dates of the advertising. I do want to point out that if we look, what kind of revenue are we talking about from a 1-cent sales tax? I would project that if you look back for the last 15 years at your SPLOST revenue, this is going to be similar revenue to what you would have collected in SPLOST. You look back 15 years, project forward 5 years, you're likely to collect about $353 million. Of course, all of that needs to be used for property tax relief. Is there any questions that I can answer for you?
Any
It
questions?
just seems like a very tight timeline that we got to adhere
You
to.
have a very, very tight timeline. Yes, sir. It needs to be done in the next. The IGA is probably the most urgent thing that needs to be hammered out.
All righty.
Mr. Sutton, one question I have.
Yes, sir.
Earlier in your presentation, you said that we can use the rollback money for any property type in the county or for us, the city. So with us having that 100% exemption for our homestead, we can use that money to roll back our commercial property tax?
It would be used to roll back property tax. If you are you levying a property tax on commercial properties?
I'm saying if we do that, then we can roll that homestead money back on the commercial stuff.
Yeah. But you'd have to be issuing the property tax at this point in time. You have to be able to, as the speakers from ACCG and GMA said, they're going to rely on your PT 31, or in the city's case, it's a PT 35. You know, how much property tax have you been collecting at this point? That's going to be the key factor, and that's the PT1, PT31 in the county's case, PT35 in the city's case. That's the number that the tax, the state property, the state commissioner of revenue is going to be relying on to say, we have applied all of this floss sales tax revenue to roll back property tax. So you have to have issued property tax.
Well, I mean, we do it through, it's offset by the loss stuff that we do. So, I mean, we do it, but I was wanting to make sure that our homestead, that since we don't have that part, we can use that based on what you said, any property type.
But you have to have issued a tax. They have to be, has to be to roll back property tax. So there, it's sounding like you have the ability to issue commercial property tax, but is there an actual property tax levy is the real important question. Because you can't, it says in the law just repeatedly throughout it that you cannot, can't be a beneficial gain. It can't be new revenue. It's not intended to be new revenue to the city or the county. It's only to be used to offset property tax revenue that you would otherwise have. So it pays you back. It's a revenue neutral sales tax for you. So you don't gain anything, you don't lose anything when you're rolling back property tax. You have to be able to roll back a property tax. Other questions?
I do have a question. So, you know, we've been talking about a lot about homestead exemption and being able to give relief to homeowners. But then I hear on the other side that this also gives relief to commercial.
Yes, ma'am.
As well.
Right.
And so I guess from a standpoint of then we would, now, let me see how I want to ask this question. So I don't.
Well, maybe I could help you, Madam Chairman. It's a very important distinction to make, and I tried to make it earlier. Homestead, the limitation on homestead value growth is one issue.
Mm-hmm.
The other issue is FLOST is used for rolling back property tax revenue for all properties,
Mm-hmm.
not just homestead.
Mm-hmm.
It helps with homestead properties, but it also helps with apartments, investor properties, commercial, industrial, your full agricultural, your full gamut of property tax land uses, if you will. All land uses will benefit from the rollback, not just homestead. And I get that, we get that confusion all the time, so I try to emphasize it.
And I guess from a standpoint, and I don't know if this is something that can be answered from the county side, when we're looking at roll back on the commercial side, how does that impact us with regards to what we've collected before? Because, you know, Henry County is a large logistics and manufacturing community. And we
Yes, ma'am.
got 6, 7 state routes that run through the county. A lot of truck traffic.
Yes,
Who's gonna
ma'am.
pay for the roads?
Right.
And so, you know, you talk about apartments, you know, takes a lot more public safety to maintain apartments than it does a home. So, you know, how does this impact our budget in the sense of we still have to provide these services? And how do we pay for it?
Now, the purpose of this sales tax is to roll back property taxes broadly across the full spectrum of land uses. And it's supposed to be revenue neutral, so it doesn't bring in any new revenue. It simply rolls back your property tax for all those land uses.
You said exactly my point. It's everybody. And that's what we've been trying to make sure that we had clear clarification on, but it does not specifically state relief to residential property owners. It is everyone. And so we will have to look at what that looks like. We also have a couple of other questions, and I know we have ACCG, GMA, and Phil here. And I hate to put Locust Grove on the spot, but I want to ask this question because this may be something they need to know going forward because they don't have a city tax now. In the event that in 5 years they determine, hey, look, we need the city tax, or in 4 years, do they have to wait until we get through the first 5 years for them to seek that benefit of FLOSS, if that makes sense, what I'm asking?
Dante, help me out here, but the way I read the law is that it could be, you could enter into an intergovernmental agreement that locks down the percentage distribution between the jurisdictions, or you could re-examine it every year, and if things changed, you may be able to reallocate funds based on those changes. Dante, is that the way you interpret it?
Appreciate that, Phil. So I think it's possible to ride it either way. Generally, what I'd say is I consider the intergovernmental agreement to be signed and thought about at a static point in time. So if y'all are signing it this year to put it to referendum in November, then the question I'd be asking is, does Locust Grove meet those requirements at that point in time? And if not, I think they'd have to sit it out until the next IGA.
Okay, thank you.
We
And come to the, yeah. We're being recorded, so anyone who has questions, no, please come up. Just come to the podium for us so that we can make sure that we capture the questions. And just for our clerk, just introduce yourself and what city you're representing, attorney.
Yeah, Emilia Walker, City Attorney McDonough. Would the TVAT tax satisfy that requirement for Locust Grove? Because I have another city where we were looking into that too, the motor vehicle tax. It is an ad valorem tax. It is on property. I know it's not personal property. I mean, I know it's not real property, but it's personal property. But that's something. Has anyone researched that or considered that?
I'd be glad to answer this if that's all right with Chairwoman Harrell.
Yes.
Yeah, so my opinion is that it needs to be a tax on real property. The items I'd recommend looking towards are that PT 35 form that Mr. Sutton had mentioned. So if you are rolling back to zero using loss, then you would show a 0 millage rate on that PT 35, which means you're not sending out and collecting on the tax, because the House Bill 581 statute says levies and collects. Outside of that, the Department of Revenue has a form on their website that shows all of the millage rates levied, and I would think that your local government would need to show a levy either on general M&O or a special service district or on a bond millage. And I was looking before this meeting, and I didn't see any of those for Locust Grove. But to your question on TAVT, I don't think that qualifies.
Yeah, we have a special district tax for
Okay, you talking to the mic, so.
we have a special district tax imposed for CID in Locust Grove presently. We also have we also roll back our property taxes with loss, but that's not going to be sufficient. So we're actually going through the process of imposing a tax, property tax this year, because loss won't be sufficient to cover us. So as far as we're going forward, we're actually holding public hearings and setting those up right now for that property tax.
So you think your SSD won't be sufficient to cover? Because that was my fallback position. If we can't get the collection component on the motor vehicle,
I think
fallback to the SSD.
from what I've heard and read, that the SSD would qualify as a tax for which you would get the benefit of the floss. Locust Grove's a little bit different in that we've got a CID special district tax in place. Then we also have but we also are going to need, we're not in a position where the loss will cover us anymore. So we are actually in the process of imposing a property tax. So when we negotiate the IGA, what we would want to do is participate in that under the understanding that we will have the property tax as opposed to not. So that's where we will be.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
So we have a lot of work that needs to get done in a couple of weeks with our city managers and city staff. Obviously, the biggest part of moving this to the ballot is having the IGA, or at least knowing what those distribution amounts are going to be. I believe Chair Harrell asked the question. I just want to make sure that I heard the correct response, that absent the IGA, there is no floss. Is that?
That's correct.
That's
Okay,
correct.
Okay. So at this point, I know unless the chair and mayors have any additional questions, I do want to, because we do have city representatives here, to afford the managers, administrators to come forward if they have any questions or comments. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else up here have any questions or comments?
Well, I'll say, obviously, I mentioned earlier, there's a tight timeline, so I know the staff's got to work out the details, and with us today, of course, is our incoming city manager, Mr. Edmondson. So welcome, sir, to Stockbridge and to Henry County. And this is one of your immediate tasks, I would say to you. But I really hope that if we talk about population, we take a look at the current population in this aspect. I know we need an IGA to be signed if we want to all participate in this. And I know that we have a public hearing coming up ourselves here in the first few weeks of August in reference to our millage rate, which has been 3.77 for the last couple of years. I would imagine through our discussion, it'll probably remain the same, I would think. But we'll see as we have the discussion publicly with the citizens of Stockbridge. So I just hope that we're able to work through this process, because we are one Henry. We got to live together. So let's make it work.
We do, and we do have expenses.
Understand? We all got expenses.
Because we
all got expenses.
do provide fire and parks and all of those different things. So at the end of the day, it still costs us money.
Yes, ma'am. Understand. It does work for us. Anyway, that's all I need to say. Thank you.
To piggyback Mayor Ford's thing, I can speak for myself, not for our mayor or for the rest of our city, but I feel like the best interest for the cities, and especially Locust Grove, is that we also look at population, and not just population, but a current population number and not the 2020 census. And I do understand that we do have costs and bills, Madam Chair, but we also have SDS agreements and other things too to help cover our weight in that as well. So we just want a fair shot and a fair opportunity when it comes to the discussions about the allocations of the money.
This may be a good time to talk about revisiting the SDS at some point.
All right. Well, so be it.
So if any of the other
Do we have
city
any
officials.
city managers, city administrators that like to come forward and make any comments at this time? I don't. No, you're good. I
You're
guess.
more than welcome, Sean. You're in the shoot. I mean, it's only a few days away if you want. It's up to you, sir. He's good? All right.
Okay, I'm looking. I don't see anyone coming from any of the cities. And so just come up. Okay, so before we conclude, Madam Chair, we do want to make sure that we huddle with our city managers, city administrators, because we do need to get some dates locked in. So just see our Deputy County Manager, Kevin Johnson, so we can go ahead and get that locked in. We are, again, on a very, very tight timeline. What we did not discuss is if we aren't able to get an IGA in place, what the next election cycle would look like. And I believe Phil can correct me, but we would put it on a March ballot? Okay. So March 18th would be the next, 17th would be the next opportunity, but the work would still have to get done. So at this point, I think we try to work expeditiously to try to get an IGA in place, and then we will report back. I will ask for some grace to our chair and boards. We may have to have some call meetings to get this IGA in place, because I know August, we're already in it, and I know we have 2 meetings that are already scheduled. So we will work as diligently as possible to try to get something to our board, but we too have to have some conversations with our elected officials to see what it is they want us to look at. I know Madam Chair asked for some specific numbers in terms of the impact to the county, and so we'll definitely report back on that information as well. I do want to pause because I do know we have the tax commissioner who is still here, and if there is any parting words from him or our chief appraiser, John Self, I'd like to afford them an opportunity. And I think Mr. Harris I think they both have comments, Madam Chair.
Okay.
After they speak, Madam Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you.
I'm going to be real brief, and I really want to thank the chair, the mayors, and the city representatives, Mayor Pro Tem, for working with us in relation to setting the millage dates. I will tell you, and I've asked John to come here as well, we are still working with the state. In fact, we're waiting on some final determinations to be made by the state today in reference to the growth report. That is going to help. That's going to hinge as to whether or not, our ability to be able to move forward with the advertising. So fingers crossed, we're hoping we get those numbers today. Worst case scenario, if we don't, we may have to take a step back and look at revisiting the millage dates yet again. I'm sorry, Stephanie. Correct. But we're hopeful that the state will be able to give us an answer by this afternoon so we can go back forward with to the newspaper. So we have to meet the advertising deadline of tomorrow at 10 o'clock. So I will tell you, my staff been working nights, weekends. John's staff's the same way, nights and weekends, to try and grind through this. A lot of it has come back to our vendors, our software vendors. They're scrambling. This is not a Henry County issue by any means. This is going on statewide. So we're just trying to get the answers as quickly as we can so we can continue to move the process forward. John?
Yeah, I'd just echo what Mr. Harris says. I really appreciate all the cities and county and school boards working with us this year.
Yep.
It's been the most challenging year that I've experienced. So thank you all.
Stephanie, what are the dates? Do you have the dates for our hearing?
I do. We will have the first millage public hearing on August 12th at 9 a.m., the second one on August 19th at 9 a.m., which will be a called meeting, and then we will have the final third public hearing and adoption at the August 9th, 6:30 regular meeting.
Okay.
And Chair, if you don't mind, I'll mention that too. Ours for the city of Starbridge will be August 11th at 9 a.m., I think it's 10 a.m. in the morning, I believe it is, on AM and 6 p.m. on that evening on the 11th, and then another 6 o'clock p.m. meeting on the 18th. I believe those dates are correct and times.
Have you all set dates?
We've already set our millage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, y'all done?
Yeah, your staffs, your clerks, yeah, they've been great to work with. We do have those set. Again, right now, we're dependent upon getting these determinations from the state so we can move forward with it. So again, we're hopeful that we can continue to maintain those same dates.
Okay. I know that I have some of my commissioners here. I don't know if they had any comments or anything, or any questions. If so, come forward. Okay, y'all good? All right. Other than that, then, meeting is adjourned. I want to thank all of the cities that came out and represented today, and, we're going to get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, appreciate it.